right, good afternoon. Welcome to the 263rd episode of the Georgia Prep Sports Drive for the GHSA State Title. Today we're going to talk some BT football. I'm decked out. We're going to have Hank Joseph joining us. He is doing play-by-play for the Titans this year. He was in the booth for their win over Calhoun, so we'll get his insight, talk about the program, some of their upcoming matchups, and then I'm interested in what Calhoun's going to need to do to respond. They've got a big matchup this Friday against Carver-Atlanta to kick off the Great Atlanta Bash. We'll preview some of those other matchups as well, talk some recruiting, and look at the Week 2 schedule. It's hard to believe that the season started 1 week ago today, Wednesday at Kell High School with the Corky Kell, and we're going to have games tomorrow, some big ones. Milton playing, who's the team from Florida? Western from Florida. I think that's by Miami.
Tournament's in Miami. They're
okay.
From Davie, Florida.
Okay, so yeah, Najee said they're from Davie, Florida, but the tournament or event is in Miami. They've touched down already. So yeah, lots on the Week 2 slate. So we'll be joined by Hank in just a second. The other big news yesterday, Edric Houston committing to Ohio State. That is massive. He was also considering Georgia, Alabama. Who else was in that top list? Yeah, Clemson and USC, but he's going to end up going to Ohio State. And 6'3", 265 pounds, one of the fiercest defensive linemen in the state, anchoring that Buford defensive line. We'll see a lot from him this year, but that's an absolutely massive get for the Buckeyes, who also have Air Nolan from Georgia, and he is a 5-star prospect as well. So that was a big announcement we saw that came just one day after Carrollton quarterback Julian Lewis committed to the USC Trojans. I'm expecting both of them to kind of make a immediate splash when they get on campus. Definitely will be college ready. Edric will be there next season. Obviously, Julian is still an underclassman, but that's good for him. I'm happy. He's had a busy recruiting thing, but Edric Houston is finally settled in, and I know those teams were definitely fighting over getting his talents to campus. But do we have Hank ready? Let's go ahead and bring him on. All right, Hank, welcome on.
Thank you for having me, Craig. It's great to be back.
Yes, certainly. It's good to see you too. So, yeah, you were up at Indiana. You graduated. I think you said you went off to Europe for a little bit, and then you came back. You have a broadcasting background. Talk a little bit about that, just what you were able to do at Indiana covering their athletics.
Yeah, so at Indiana, got into play-by-play with Big Ten Plus Network. So that's kind of the not student run, but, mostly composed of students as far as production, camera work, and of course all the commentating. So we were able to do volleyball, softball, wrestling, swim and dive, baseball, and, a few other sports, field hockey as well. And then some radio commentating for football and basketball with the student radio station. And then was able to get into the IU student television. And that was, we did our own version of SportsCenter called Hoosier Sports Night. We did a little talk show called The Toss Up, where, we would just bring in different topics from, around the country in sports, around the world in sports, college, professional, all the ranks. So was able to do a lot in my 4 years there, and I'm proud to be a Hoosier graduate.
Absolutely. It's a great school, great program. And when we were at the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic a week ago today, we were actually at Kell, and Mike Conti was there, 92.9 The Game, Jason Longshore, and I just heard them giving advice to other people that wanted to get involved in sports, and they said, cover any sport. You might be a football fan, go out there, cover swim and dive. Go out there, cover volleyball. So when I think of like Indiana athletics, that seems to be a college where it really is supportive of all the different sports. And so, as you said, you were just, it didn't matter what season it was, you guys were out there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best swim and dive programs in the country. And, I'll tell you, for someone who doesn't have any experience in that, broadcasting for that was a new challenge. And, wrestling and volleyball, they're getting a lot better. They're in the toughest conference, in the country for those two sports. And, basketball needs no further introduction. Football, during the COVID year, had a few great years as well. So, a lot of things building outside of just, the basketball state.
Yep, and I thought that was great advice, and it reminds me kind of when lacrosse started to gain ground in the state of Georgia. The first couple years I covered it, I was like, wow, this is really exciting. Najee was covering it last year, covering some huge upsets. So what was it about being at a school like BT that is so competitive in all the different sports where you were able to just be at a high school program that really excels across the board?
Yeah, when I got there, but both my brothers played at Blessed Trinity when I was younger. But football, they hadn't ever really won anything, as far outside of maybe a couple of region championships. But you walk into the gym and you see soccer and you see track and field and you see, swim and dive. They even had a state championship. They had championships in all these different sports. And I was fortunate enough, my freshman year, we made it all the way to the state championship under Coach McFarland in football. But, seeing all these other sports, lacrosse was always incredible in my time there as well. They had a bunch of tennis state championships. They had a golf state championship. So, you really got to see all these different athletics thrive. And I was fortunate enough in my time to see two football state championships and left, and they won another one right after.
Yep. So you were mentioning that first run to the finals in 2015. So, BT back then, I think they were only a Class 3A program. They end up losing an absolute heartbreaker to Westminster in the Georgia Dome. I remember how insane that game it was, kind of the last minute going into overtime. But what was it like in the years after that when you guys are going up against Trevor Lawrence in the playoffs, just huge upsets? And what is it about Blessed Trinity football that has just led to this rise?
Well, Coach McFarland, everything pretty much starts and ends with him. He left Roswell to come over to Blessed Trinity and, the kind of flipped the program on its head. It started in the feeder programs, building up the 6th, 7th, 8th grade teams. And then, we were getting those guys to continue to stay at Blessed Trinity. Now I know there's a lot of people that move around, especially at the high school level as well. But, my freshman year, we had Steele Chambers, who's a starting middle linebacker at Ohio State. We had J.D. Bertrand, who's a starting middle linebacker at Notre Dame. We had Jake Smith, and we had Ryan Davis in our class as well, J.R. Bivens too. The list goes on and on. But it was a great senior class when we were freshmen, and they taught those guys a lot of good things about just committing to the grind and continuing to put in the work in the off season to thrive in season. And so that's really kind of where it all started. Huge credit to Coach McFarland as well, who's done in the high school ranks now. He's at Georgia Tech helping out with their, recruiting. But that's kind of where it all started. And, especially in Georgia football, you need those guys. You can have a great team, but you need those game wreckers, those game breakers. And we were fortunate to have a lot of those in my 4 years.
100%. Ryan Davis, man, that guy was an incredible playmaker and athlete. Mm-hmm. We didn't even talk about how good BT's been at baseball. Wow.
Yep.
And a lot of those guys are two sports, and that's what I find interesting about BT is typically they don't really even have like a huge focus on spring or playing those spring scrimmages because everyone's playing different sports. So you factor that into the fact that, they had Coach Hall last year. They bring in a new coach this year with Coach Dudley. So what were your expectations just going into this first win, just the new staff, maybe not knowing what this team's going to look like?
Yeah, so I was able to talk to Coach Dudley, Wednesday or Thursday last week, and they had a scrimmage against Oconee County, and how those high school scrimmages go. The starters really only play, the first half. And they didn't really look great. In all honesty, and Coach Dudley, agreed with me on that they didn't look great. Quarterback Brooks Goodman threw a pick 6 on his first pass of the season. So I was certainly a little bit nervous heading into game 1 against Calhoun. BT's was able to beat Calhoun in game 1 last year, and You look up and down Calhoun's roster, and they've just got dudes at a lot of different positions. But Blessed Trinity, while they don't necessarily always have the big name guys, it's just a really good team. So we knew that the defense was going to be pretty good coming in, and they certainly showed that last Friday. But the offense was a little bit of a question mark. They lost Kieran Davis last year, who had over 130 rushes for the team and was kind of their bell cow. And that's how BT's been run a lot in the past. Run first, run second, pass on third down. But this is a different offense, and Coach Dudley told me about that coming in. We're going to spread. He kind of runs the spread offense. We're going to spread things out. We're going to sling the ball around, and so I was very excited to see. Watching BT my whole life growing up. Again, like I said, they were a run first team, and so still are, but we've seen what they can do. They've got a lot of weapons on the outside, and they were able to punch in a couple touchdowns last week and pick up the win.
Yeah, and I would think just early on in the season, it's like some teams, you won't really want to go out there and run like the read option. You're going to want to keep it simple, just run the football, and maybe add some of the other intricacies to the playbook later on. So how were they able to kind of jump out, build that lead? Was it just great defense, field position, or just, as you said, that physical running within the spread?
Yeah, well, it was a 0-0 game, at the end of the first quarter, and both teams offensively didn't look sharp at all. And that's expected. First game of the season, especially at the high school level. You don't expect the offenses to be exploding like that unless you're returning, 5, 6 guys, 7 guys as starters on offense. So neither team looked really good. Calhoun fumbled the ball at their own 12-yard line at the start of the second quarter. So Blessed Trinity was able to punch it in there with one first down, and then able to score, second and goal from the 1-yard line. So 7-0, and that was 7-0 all the way into the half. Blessed Trinity offense, penalties were the story of the game. It was there wasn't a single clean drive all the way until the fourth quarter for the Blessed Trinity offense. Just false starts, holdings, whatever, intentional groundings, all kinds of different things for the offense. And it just didn't look good, but the BT defense was able to, pick it up and keep Blessed Trinity in it. And then, we get to the second half, and Calhoun's able to score on a 70-yard touchdown pass to none other than Amari Watson, who I'm sure you've already talked about a few times this season. 4-star heading into this year, just picked up an offer from Alabama no more than a few weeks ago. So he flashed his greatness that has been the big hype coming into the season. And BT was able to get the ball, inside Calhoun's side of the field a couple times, and were able to put the game away 17-7. But offensively, it just didn't look great.
And you're right. The penalties, I was looking at it, 11 penalties for BT, just 3 for Calhoun. I think a lot of those are just the delay of games you get that you can probably clean up later, some procedural penalties as well. But that's obviously going to hurt them, putting them in those third and longs. But
yeah,
if that BT offense is able to eliminate those penalties, have the positive plays on first and second down, how confident are you that that's going to pair well just with a defense that already out the gates just proved that it's kind of in midseason form?
Yeah, I would feel pretty good. Quarterback Brooks Goodman looked great. He can make just about all the throws on the football field. He's very calm, cool, and collected. We haven't really seen him in too many pressure situations, but tie game 7-7 going against that Calhoun defense with, already a few college commits. That was kind of where you saw him step up and take control of the team. You need a good quarterback at the high school level. That's where everything starts and ends offensively. And Blessed Trinity's been fortunate to have a few good ones in this last, 10, 15 years. But, I feel pretty good. They've got the playmakers on the outside that I don't know if Blessed Trinity's had, that many times. And, even though we had Ryan Davis and a few other guys, this is a kind of wide receiver all the way down to tight end. I feel confident in every playmaker on the Blessed Trinity offense. And they're going to have to be able to pass the ball because they don't have the Steel Chambers or the Elijah Green or the Milton Sheltons, this season. So they're going to have to be comfortable passing the ball and passing it a lot. And Goodman showed that he could do that last week.
Absolutely. And so it was an interesting stat line because you have Goodman 17 of 20 passing. They get the ball to a lot of different guys, I think 8 different targets. They weren't necessarily able to establish that consistency running the ball, just 44 yards on the ground, I believe. Some sacks also to Brooks. But is Quinn Davis, is he related to Ryan?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
There we
Fifth
go.
in the generation.
Magic.
So, no, I mean, unfortunately, there's not another one unless, I don't know about him. But, yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, we had Quinn running around as a little kid, causing a ruckus. And now, I mean, of course, he's out there making plays, caught about a 30-yard touchdown pass to take the lead, his first of his high school career. And, he's showing that greatness that we've seen from all the Davis siblings in the past.
Absolutely. So he had the lone touchdown through the air. Was that the one in the fourth quarter?
It was.
Okay, so that was the game winner. Gosh, what is it about that Davis family and BT? And then, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of other underclassmen. So when you look at the overall roster, I mean, how senior-led is it? And, I mean, how young is the team?
Yeah, so talking to Coach Dudley last week, I think it was 5 guys on each side of the football. And, of course, that's a few guys that play both ways. But, a younger team, I mean, a lot of sophomores and a lot of juniors making plays. And, we spoke about DJ Jacobs, who's the freshman, already highly heralded, in the collegiate ranks as, kind of the next big prospect out of Georgia, already 6'5", needs to come into his height a little bit more, maybe fill out. He's playing that defensive end, kind of a standing defensive end right now, but Coach Dudley said he'll probably drop down onto the ground pretty soon here. And he made some spectacular plays in the second half, sort of just seemed like he had to get his footing, in his first high school game. But the young guys on Blessed Trinity are spectacular, and the seniors, are showing a lot of leadership as far as helping those young guys out.
Yeah, I saw one comment from the game. They said DJ just took over in the second half. Calhoun's trying to pull ahead, come back late, but he just made it absolute hell for them, was setting the edge. I think had a couple tackles for loss. So certainly incredible debut for him. And as you mentioned, freshman, 6'5", he's going to fill out. So he is certainly going to be an exciting player to watch. And I just find that amazing. Like a 14-year-old going out there playing Calhoun on the defensive line and going out there and having a performance like that. I mean, that's special to have that talent at your freshman year.
Yeah, it was spectacular. He didn't really have many chances in the first half to make too many plays, but every opportunity he had in the second half, I mean, he was in the backfield causing mayhem, as you mentioned, a couple tackles for loss. You got to put a body on him, and I have a feeling by the end of this season they're probably going to have to put two guys on him or chip him, off the edge. I mean, he is so explosive off the line of scrimmage. So I'm excited to see, how he continues to grow in this first season.
Yep, and then the next matchup is going to be at ELCA. I think ELCA had a tough outing their first week. They're going to want to come out. They're always athletic. They like to run the ball. A tough football team for sure. And even in some of their better seasons, they always challenge themselves in non-region. They might be sub 500, and then next thing you know, they're making a deep playoff run. But that's just one private school on your schedule. I mean, what are some of these rivalries like, just being someone that wore the BT colors just with these other private schools around Atlanta?
Yeah, well, St. Pius, the crosstown showdown, I think this is year, I don't even know, 10 or 11 of that. And Blessed Trinity's had their number, for a long time. They lead the series. I don't know what the exact series record is, but they're up probably 3 or 4 games on St. Pius. and then Marist. That's become the rivalry over the past 6 years. Blessed Trinity obviously beat them at their place in the state championship. I think it was my sophomore or junior year, probably my junior year. So a little bit of bad blood in that series, and Marist coming to Blessed Trinity. I know that they're going to want to exact a little bit of revenge for what happened 5-6 years ago. And Marist always a good team. They're still running that triple option, and they can get the ball to any guy in the backfield, and they can score a 60-yarder. So I'm really looking forward to that game, week 5. And then, it's a lot of those public schools now in their conference, and Roswell certainly had their number, and Roswell looks good once again after that beatdown they put on Denmark. So, if you're Blessed Trinity, though, you got to take it game by game. It's easy to look ahead, certainly at that Pius and Marist games, but, Elka could sneak up on you. I mean, like you said, they're coming off a tough loss, and they're going to be fired up at their home place, and that's a series that Blessed Trinity has had for going on 8-9 years. We've played them a lot. It started with scrimmaging and then put them in the schedule. So Elka knows kind of what Blessed Trinity likes to do. So it should be a good game on Friday.
Yeah, and what did you get just the sense from the players after the big Calhoun win? I mean, obviously the scenes on the field were pretty incredible. The student fan section was out there rushing the field. It was very exciting, but what did you just think in terms of their goals for the season, just what that win meant for them?
Yeah, well, I mean, Blessed Trinity was an underdog. I mean, there's no other way to look at it. We had no idea what this team was really going to look like. I mean, new third coach in 4 years, an outside guy as well, which Blessed Trinity hasn't had since Coach McFarland. So, we really didn't have any idea. I think expectations were kind of middling. It could have been good, it could have been bad, but who knew? And Calhoun, you knew exactly what you were going to get. I mean, 2 guys on the offense preseason, 4A state or 5A state, all state guys. And then you've got Amari Watson, you've got Christian Gregory, you've got Sager Quinn. I mean, they have guys. So I think that a lot of Blessed Trinity fans, we're a little bit nervous heading into week 1, especially after how the game turned out last year. Calhoun threw 3 interceptions and kind of gave the game away. So, you could tell that after week 1, Blessed Trinity's pretty fired up heading into this season after, no idea what really the team was going to look like.
Yep, that was the 5th time BT's played Calhoun. The first time BT's never been ranked in the matchup. And so You're absolutely right. They were considered an underdog. So you saw Calhoun week 1. They have a game against Carver-Atlanta Friday night. It's going to be televised. It'll be the first time they've ever matched up. What are some of the glaring areas you think they're going to need to clean up just after that week 1?
Have to establish the run. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. Calhoun's offensive line didn't look great. I mean, they just simply didn't. Blessed Trinity, every time they brought more than 5-6 guys, Calhoun's offensive line was struggling. Caden Williams couldn't really get anything going. I don't think he had a run for more than 7 or 8 yards in the entire game. And again, this is a guy who's preseason All-State. So, they have the playmakers. There's no doubt about it. Justin Beasley, the wide receiver, look out for him. I mean, he made some incredible plays. Trey Townsend would lob it up, give him a chance. And Justin Beasley, I mean, he's a stud. So look out for him to start picking up some offers this season. Guy can fly down the field and can get up and get the ball, but that offensive line has got to play better. They weren't losing yards to penalties. They were just losing yards to sacks and tackles for loss, like you said earlier. So that offensive line has to get better. Defense is spectacular. I mean, you've got 3 guys on the defensive line. They kind of run a 3-3 stat offense. So they've got guys on the back end to stop those explosive plays. And Christian Gregory's a one-man wrecking crew. I wouldn't be surprised to see him pick up some other D1 offers. He's already committed to Liberty, but that guy can just flat out play. I mean, he can beat double teams, can sit back and spy. This is a guy who was an offensive lineman 2 years ago, and now he's one of the best defensive linemen in the state. So defensively, they're fine. I didn't really see a lot of issues. Blessed Trinity really only scored because they had 2 great field position They were just kind of lucky with that. Credit to the defense for sure, but that offensive line for Calhoun has to play better.
Yep. And so I pulled up the stats from the Carver game. They actually opened the season against LaGrange. I think that was a team that they threw on the schedule. I think last year they had a different matchup, but check this out. They had 7 sacks against LaGrange in that matchup. They got a big win in terms of tackles for the loss, 14. So I think you're 100% right. They got to get Williams going. They got to get the run going because Joshua Stone, that Carver defense is no joke. So we will certainly be watching that. But were you able to watch any of the other week 1 results? Anything that stood out?
I caught a couple. I mean, more of the games in our region, our games coming up. I mean, Marist really battled against Gainesville. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect out of that game. Gainesville's always a pretty solid team. Marist fell by 8. They were in that game the whole time. So I was pretty impressed with Marist, and, that's definitely one to circle in week 5 as we get there. And if you're a BT fan, you've got to be nervous at seeing that Roswell score, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, Roswell's always going to be good, but maybe not that good. I mean, Denmark is a team who's certainly picked things up since, their introduction, my freshman year of high school. So, 8-9 years ago, and they've continued to get better, but Roswell shutting them out is a tough look. Johns Creek didn't look great, at least from the box score. And then, Parkview's always a great team. I was very surprised. McEachern was almost able to pull that one out in the Corky Kell. Some great Corky Kell games. Shout out to you guys. Shout out to IJ. Great job putting that on as always. But I'm excited. Week 1, I think it's tough to take too much away, from all these games. You kind of got to wait and see a couple more scores before you can start making, opinions and assumptions about a lot of these schools. Like Calhoun last year, they were able to make it to the 3rd, 4th round of the playoffs. They only finished the regular season, 7-3. So I mean, we've got plenty of time to see how things will shake out in the GHSA.
Yeah, and speaking of like Calhoun, their region's going to have Cass in it. Cartersville, Dalton looked good, and then Hiram, a team that I think beat Calhoun recently. But I was surprised with Cass. They have so much talent, and then Rome shut them out 34-0. Watching that game, I've never seen a defense that was just able to keep batting down the balls like on 3rd down. Rome did such a good job about that because, I mean, you have a great quarterback at Cass, great receivers, but the longest play that entire game I think was like 14 yards for Cass. So, I mean, that was a surprising result as well. You mentioned the Marist Gainesville game. That looked like it was just Gavin Hall, the transfer from Hebron Christian, just having like a Christian McCaffrey game.
Doing whatever he wanted.
Yep.
And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm glad you mentioned the Cass game because I spoke to Steve Gates last summer when I was at SCORE. And, there was a lot of hype. I mean, he was really proud of the way that program was moving. He had really built it from the ground up. And they have a lot of upperclassmen this year. So I was expecting them to, have a good season. I know Coach Stevenson at Calhoun even mentioned, how good they were expected to be. So, hopefully they can just brush that one off. But yeah, Gainesville, I mean, that kid at Gainesville, he had himself a night.
Absolutely. I think 2 receptions, 49 yards as well. So in terms of a transfer making an impact, he certainly did. And there were some other transfers too. I know we were really impressed with some of the guys Walton brought in, whether it's Bam Bride getting it done defensively, offensively, the big Daniel Calhoun. So what else are you just looking forward to this week? We mentioned the ELCA game, just heading down there and just seeing how this season is going to unfold for the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited. when you've been away from the team for 5 years, you don't recognize any of the names. You don't even recognize half the coaches because Coach Dudley's brought in a new few guys. We had no idea. But coming off of week one, that defense, I'm excited to see how they grow. I mean, I don't know if how much better they can play than they did last week. I would expect maybe one or two shutouts from this BT defense this year. I mean, they looked so sharp. Their secondary is one of the best I've seen in my time watching Titan football. They've got two guys, Mark Townsend and Chase Malloy, who, just heckle these receivers. Don't give them any room to breathe. And I'm excited to see Calhoun. I mean, I know that wasn't their best performance. I know that they could play a lot better than they did, and I'm sure that they will. So I'm excited to see, kind of what Coach Stevenson has planned for the rest of this year. And then Blessed Trinity in the region. I mean, I think that they're changing the regions up next year, right? Once again, yep. They're taking it back to 6 classifications instead of 7, I think is what I heard. So, this will probably be the last time that BT ever gets to play Roswell, a school that's right down the street. So I'm excited to see, if they play with any kind of extra motivation. I would hope that they do, and kind of try to beat up on their big brother right down the street.
Certainly, and man, if your defense is playing well, you definitely want to establish that run and help them out and keep possession. So I think that'll be key. Mm-hmm. Who were some of the guys, though, that you're going to just be watching the coming weeks to help in the backfield and kind of fill in that role?
Well, Cam Betts is, the running back. He's the number 1 running back on the team. He's the best running back on the team. He just didn't have very many opportunities. I mean, every time that he had a hole that was big enough to run through, he would. And he'd be able to break a couple tackles. And he's a great, great pass catcher out of the backfield. So look for him to, catch some screen passes, maybe catch some swing passes. And they're going to try and get him the ball in the open field. But, a lot of those holes were closing up quickly, and credit to that Calhoun defensive line. But Cam Betts is the guy. Dylan Tarico, who's the middle linebacker on defense, he is an absolute stud, had 2 sacks last game and had 6 last year. So, he can run the ball a little bit as well, and very capable runner, very hard runner. So expect to see him in the backfield every once in a while in those short yardage situations. But Cam Betts is the guy. And BT, has kind of always ran with a 1 running back type of team, bring in another guy. We were fortunate to have Steel Chambers and Elijah Green when I was there. So you couldn't really do 1 running back because you had 2 guys that were better than everybody else with the football in their hands. But Cam Betts, I mean, look out for the name. He's going to continue to progress. And if he can get some holes, open it up, he's gonna run for a lot of yards this year.
Yep, certainly showed it. 23 carries last game, some tough yards for sure. And then last question, because it's kind of relevant to the whole Roswell BT area. What about Fellowship Christian? What have you seen from that program? And did you get to catch any of their big wins, some of their playmakers, whether it's Josh Petty, an absolute monster in that junior class, and then the big running back, CJ Givers?
Yeah, I mean, those guys are some studs. I was able to catch, kind of the end of the first half, start of the second half, and I mean, that game was already pretty much over with. I mean, Fellowship looked crisp. They looked sharp. Credit to the guy that I talked about at the beginning of the show for going over there and, continuing to build on what that program had done. I know they were in the state championship when I was in school at Blessed Trinity. But I mean, it almost feels like they shouldn't be competing in the class that they're competing in because it feels like they're a little bit better than most of those other teams. I mean, they looked great. They've got some dudes that I've never really seen in a Fellowship uniform. So, credit to them, and they look good. And once again, I mean, this Woodstock 92 area, right on the corner, you got 3 schools within, 3/4 of a mile, and all of them are, per usual, great at football.
100%. Yeah. And as you mentioned, the fact that Fellowship has the number 2 offensive tackle in the country, that is a scary reality for teams in 2A this year. I mean, that guy. I'm
And with
picking Fellowship
Givers,
to
I
win
mean,
state.
it's just, I agree. I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, they've got the talent and they've certainly got the coaching around them. So, I mean, Givers is a stud. I mean, that guy could run it in any classification in the state. So, I mean, I'm really excited to continue to watch Fellowship this year.
Yeah, they got so much talent. Well, Hank, thank you so much. Good luck on the call this week. We look forward to it. We'll be following the Titans closely, and it's always great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you, Craig. Thanks so much for having me on. Hopefully, we can talk again closer to the playoffs.
Yep, that schedule is going to be very fun. So thanks, Hank.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll take one quick break, and we'll come back on the other side. All right, welcome back. So now I'm going to go over the Great Atlanta Bash lineup and just highlight kind of what to watch for, what we're looking forward to in these matchups. So starting off on Friday, as we mentioned, the big game between Carver-Atlanta and Calhoun. You heard it from Hank, his breakdown on what Calhoun needs to do: establish the run with Caden Williams, help have better pass protection, and then the fact that Carver produced 14 tackles for loss and 7 sacks last game. I think that's the storyline right there. And from the box score, and this is against a good LaGrange team coached by Matt Napier, a team that was ranked number 10 in a lot of polls in 4A, team that made the playoffs last year in 4A. So that's a huge start, but I think this popped out. Jamontez Hines from Carver-Atlanta had 5 sacks in that game against LaGrange. He's 6'2", 215-pound defensive end, outside linebacker. That's next level. He's obviously leading the state right now with 5 sacks week 1. So we'll see if Jamontez can keep up that production. I think that's going to be a player to watch for sure. He's number 44 for Carver, and that's going to be really exciting. That's in terms of intriguing matchups, I think that's one of the best we'll have it in this broadcast schedule. Just the fact that they've never played, as Coach Miles and Coach Stevenson said 2 years ago, both those programs were playing in the state title, one after another, and that was at Center Park. And so they've both been really close to titles recently, and that will be a great way to prepare them. Calhoun has an incredibly difficult region ahead of them with Cartersville, Cass, Dalton, and Hiram. And then Carver has Douglas, Cedar Grove, and Sandy Creek. So this is a big matchup for both of them. And real quick on Sandy Creek, that's someone that in terms of the week 1 teams that impressed, Coach Smiley taking over that program and doing what they did against Noonan was phenomenal. It had a school record 502 rushing yards, and Coach Smiley at Central Carroll led one of the better ground games in the state last year. They averaged about 240 rushing yards per game, so you bring Coach Smiley over to Sandy Creek with their athletes and Amari Lattimore, the sophomore, who last year in that matchup only took 4 carries. This year he's absolutely taking over the game with over 230 yards. I think that is a very promising sign for Sandy Creek, and I think Coach Smiley's going to bring that rushing attack to the Patriots that he was able to use at Central Carroll that really made them a relevant program from a 3-4 win team to one that's making serious noise in the playoffs. So that's just a great hire and a fantastic debut. So once we return on Saturday, though, we're going to have a triple header, 3 more intriguing matchups. So it's going to start with Maynard Jackson and Miller Grove. That's been an exciting head-to-head matchup the last few seasons. Last year, Miller Grove won 24-7, and Miller Grove had some big wins last year, and then they got to the region. I think they probably missed the playoffs by one game. It's a situation where you beat the number 2 seed in the region, but then lose a couple tough ones, and then you're on the outside looking in. So they had some big victories, and then Maynard Jackson had a phenomenal season last year in Class 5A. They ended up losing by 6 points to Cambridge in the first round, and Cambridge was a region champ, top seed last year, an incredible senior-led program. And then during Maynard Jackson's season, they also had a huge win over Mays in the region, so they can show up and play serious football. And I think that'll be a good matchup. That's 10 a.m. on Saturday to kick off the doubleheader. So be sure to wake up on Saturday and check out the results of that one. And then who has stood out for Maynard Jackson? There is a freshman to watch, Jacob Jackson. He was their player of the game in their scrimmage where they dominated Midtown. And then he was also the player of the game in their 16-15 win over Arabia Mountain. He's, I think in both contests, he's been able to get in the end zone running the ball, and also has a pair of interceptions. So he's playing both sides of the ball as a freshman for Maynard Jackson, and that will be an interesting matchup with Miller Grove. Let's see. Who did Miller Grove open with? Let me just check this real quick. Yeah, they played Tucker. So Miller Grove had a tough loss to Tucker, and then Maynard Jackson had a 1-point win over Arabia Mountain. All right, so then the second game, Mays and Douglas County. It was an incredible matchup last year. Mays did not give up. It was a firework game, and then that was really the first time we got to see Douglas County in person, and their quarterback, Sire Hardaway, who is a special player. He last year he had 3 passing touchdowns, I think 1 rushing touchdown, and then he's been back for his senior season, and he came out, had 4 touchdowns and also a rushing score. He passed 80%, and I think he's going to have just a massive season and a big game against Mays. Mays was actually upset by Douglas, who's going to be in our nightcap. So I think that's a big rivalry game too, Mays and Douglas. I was looking at the Mays pep rally before. That was not just a non-region game. There's a lot of pride in that APS matchup, and so Mays is going to come out. They know Douglas County's talented, and they know they're going to have to try to slow down Sire. They're going to have to get to him. But Douglas County, they are so good at getting the ball out. Sire has even more weapons this year, some really impressive sophomore receivers, and he's just going to spread the ball out and do what he does. He's expecting big things. One of the, I think, more interesting tweets I saw just in terms of a player setting goals for themselves was Sire. He said he wants to throw for 5,000 yards this season. That is a big mark to try to hit, and if he hits that, I mean, you're talking about top 3, top 2 in the state for this season, and that obviously would hinge on a playoff run, which I really think Douglas County is going to be able to do. So if you want to watch a 6A program that is starting to get some noise, they cracked Matt Stewart's latest poll. I have at number 8, I believe, in 6A. They're going to have a big region matchup with Hughes coming up. If you want to see Douglas County, Sire Hardaway, and see if they are going to be the real deal this year, you need to tune in. It's going to be a 12:45 kickoff, and then we'll see how Mays is able to rebound. They did lose a lot of their seniors last year, but they have been the marquee program in APS. They rarely lose back-to-back games. They always rebound well, but slowing down Sire, that is going to be a tall task, and I'm excited to see him once again in person. And then the final game is going to be Douglas and Booker T. Washington. That is the West Side Classic. It is the oldest rivalry in APS, and it will be the first time that we're going to see it in the nightcap of the Great Atlanta Bash. So Douglas has dominated the series historically with a 39-1 overall edge, but it has been more competitive in the recent years. They're just 6-3 since 2009. It was a really close game last year, and then the year before that, Booker T actually beat Douglas 41-13. I think what's also intriguing about this is both coaches are into their third seasons at the program. In 2020, Douglas ended up going 0-5. That was the COVID year, and they just scrapped the season. Now they are actually a key team in Class 2A that I think is going to, they're guaranteed a playoff spot out of that 4-team region. And I think they can make some noise. I think that entire region has an opportunity to, especially seeing how Cedar Grove and Sandy Creek looked week 1. So I'm talking about a team that played that same region competition last year. That obviously helped them out just preparing for this year, and beating Mays week 1. Watch out for Douglas this year for sure. And then I think the rivalry aspect of it, that always adds excitement to the matchups. Just in the case of your Alabamas and Auburns, it doesn't matter if Alabama's undefeated and Auburn's got 6 losses. When they play in the Iron Bowl, you never know what's going to happen. I think the same is true just in a big rivalry game like that. All right, and then the player to watch in that game, 100%, Jonte Gilbert on Douglas. He's a junior, one of the highest rated 2025 guys in the state. He's going to be playing safety. He's been balling out since his freshman year. He's going to be all over the place and definitely an exciting playmaker to watch. So that's the Great Atlanta Bash for you. You can read more in-depth previews at scoreatl.com. We got it all in one article up there. And we will be live from Henderson Stadium Friday for the Calhoun Carver game, and then we'll be back all morning and afternoon on Saturday for those 3 matchups. So be sure to tune in, and you can also get your tickets. We have them for sale as well. And it is a fun event just to swing by. Last year, South Atlanta kind of kicked things off, had a big victory. Keywan Brown, the running back, had a monster performance, and then he stuck around and saw some great games. And I think that's what we're going to see as well. A lot of exciting action on Saturday. So that's it for today. Be sure to join us tomorrow with Keeping It Real with Najee Wilkins. He's going to have recruiting breakdowns, player insight. I think he's going to be highlighting the underclassmen. Yep, that will be key because Najee's really good at organizing his list of prospects and really providing a lot of individuals coverage. So be sure to check that out. He'll be live at 2 o'clock tomorrow, and subscribe to our YouTube page as well. We got tons of content up there. Check out yesterday's episode of Underrated and Overlooked. We talked about our all Corky teams and recap the week 1 action. So we'll be back, but have a good one. Our games just weren't good week 1. Like if we were at the Hughes Carrollton game and then we went on to break that down, people would tune in.
100%.
Yeah.
Tweet about it. Yeah.
Because no one else is doing a show on like the big game.
I think it's just like you said. I think it's just a matter of